All right, I'm sure that you're completely overwhelmed with all the information that I threw at you in the last lesson, but that's okay. It's good to be overwhelmed. You should be a little intimidated by this software because of how big it is, but that's why I gave it to you on this first day of orientation, so that you can jump into the software now, have a little bit of time for the rest of this week to play around with the different tools and start making things. So it's your turn to jump into Illustrator and, just like I did, make something like this hot dog or the cheeseburger that I made. But don't limit yourself to food. It doesn't have to be a hot dog or a cheeseburger. It could be a vehicle or a piece of furniture or a friendly robot. And the level of detail can grow with your experience. Once you've started getting a handle on the different tools, feel free to make multiple pieces. It doesn't have to be something super simple, but I would highly encourage you to start there, especially if this is your first time in Illustrator. Just do something simple. Remember, this hot dog is made up of 4 shapes. The 2 buns, which are duplicates of each other, the hot dog, and then this line of mustard. Very, very simple. So try to come up with any object that you feel like you could recreate in very simple shapes using the shape tools inside of Illustrator, and play around with colors, the layout, different strokes, and if you're getting a little more adventurous, you could get into the opacities like I did, potentially even try a filter or two. But again, don't get hung up in all of these menus and all of these different effects. We're going to get to that later. Start out basic and work from there. If you have more time, try and do something a little more complex like this sofa that I made. And if you're really feeling confident, you could try and make something more complex like this robot. Now, I made all of my pieces of art in a portrait mode, but for most of the artwork in this course, we're going to want you to be working in a landscape layout and a very specific resolution. So when you go to make your own projects, we're going to want you to go to File, New, and use a different preset than I did. Come over to the Web tab, and then the second preset, Web Large, which is 1920 by 1080. That is the HD frame resolution of videos, and most motion designers will be working in this resolution. So this is what we're going to want you to design in. So just double click on that, and that will make a new document in the correct size. Now, if I wanted to, I could easily just take one of my artworks over here. So let's say this hot dog, everything's unlocked. I'll copy it and then paste it over in this document. And I want to center it up, and I'll just reformat it for this this widescreen format instead. So I'm just going to grab my background layers only, and then I'm going to click and drag on the bottom right corner while holding Option to scale proportionally from the center. Not proportionally, but just equally from the center, and then have it locked there to the bottom right corner. Then I'm going to lock those 3 objects for the background, select everything else, and then scale this up while holding Shift to constrain the proportions. Hold down Option or Alt, and there we go. About there is pretty good. Maybe drop it down in the frame just a little bit. And now I have this wider format version of my hot dog art. So that's great. Now, once you've created your artwork, how do you export it? Well, it's actually pretty simple in Illustrator. We're just going to go up to File, Export, Export for Screens. Now, this is going to open up another menu that seems pretty intimidating, but don't worry, it's not as complicated as it looks. It can be, but the way that we're going to use it won't be. We're going to want to click on the Artboards tab, and this is going to bring up any artboards in your document. And if you haven't already, you can rename them here. So I could rename this one Hot Dog just by clicking on that text and typing it in. And whatever you put in there is what the file that Illustrator exports will be named. So I'm going to leave it as that. And right now, under this Select menu, this is where you can say which artboards you want to export. So let me just back out of this for a second and show you this one, which has 5 artboards. If I were to go to File, Export for Screens, you see I have all of my different artboards here. So I could say All, and that will check everything. I could say Full Document, and that's going to export all of them as at once in one big image. That's not going to work though, because we want you to export in this widescreen format. Or you could say Arrange. So if I only wanted to export boards 1 through 3, I could say 1 through 3, and it's only going to check those. You could also just individually check them. I think that's a little bit easier. But in the case of this hot dog, I only have one artboard, so File, Export, Export for Screens, and we'll just leave it at all. Make sure that's named, and then you just pick a place that you want to export to. So by default, it's going to put it on my Creative Cloud files. I want to put it right on my desktop. And then we have a couple of checkboxes here. The first one is open location after export. So that's just going to open up a window where your file has been exported to once you've actually done that. And then the second is create subfolders. This is usually used for when you're exporting multiple versions of the same graphic. We don't need that checked, so I'll uncheck that. And then come down to the formats section. This is where we can determine what type of image file this will be once we've saved it. Right now it's set to PNG, which is a great format, but for School of Motion classes, we're going to want you to export them as JPEGs. So that's what this JPG is, and then you see 100, 80, 50, 20. Those numbers are the quality, because you can compress images to reduce the file size, but they're lower quality. So we want to have 100% quality. So JPG 100 is what you want to check. And this is going to add a suffix of 100 indicating the resolution. You can leave that on or take it off. It doesn't matter. We don't really need to see that suffix. But once all of that is set up, you've got everything ready to go, and we can come down and click on Export Artboard. And just like that, it opens up the Finder. Here's my exported image. I press spacebar to preview that, and I have my final artwork ready to go, ready to upload for critique. And that's all you have to do to export your artwork. So like I said, if you have multiple pieces of art that you want to submit, you can export multiple artboards at once, or you can upload more as you make them. Totally up to you. Just make sure that with all the artwork you make that you're actually saving your Illustrator files as well. So I still have this untitled, it's not saved. So I'm going to press Command S to save. I'll just stick this on my desktop for now, but I'm going to name this Jake Bartlett-Hotdog. And that's going to give me the .ai for Adobe Illustrator. This is the Illustrator document. It will preserve all of the editability. It'll keep my file exactly the way that it is right now. I'll click Save, and that way I can always edit this further inside of Illustrator after the fact. The JPEGs that you export are flat images. There's only enough information in those files to display what you're seeing in them, but you can't actually go back into that JPEG, bring it into Illustrator, and adjust all of these paths. It gets rid of all of that complex information so that it can have a much smaller file size. The Illustrator files, though, will always let you come back in and continue working right where you left off from the last time you saved. And I really encourage you to try and challenge yourself with this. Give yourself a plenty of time to play around with the program, make mistakes, try and figure out what's going on. But if you don't know what's happening yet, don't worry. We're going to get into the actual lessons and the course material very soon. But this week, just try and play around and have fun. Try and make something. And if you need to find some inspiration, one of my favorite places to search for inspiration is Dribbble. If you're not familiar with that, it's Dribbble with 3 B's. You can see right here, dribbble.com. This is free to browse. You can create an account, but you can't post unless you're invited. So if you're curious about being invited and getting an invite to Dribbble, just post in the Facebook group. A lot of times people have invites that they can give out, so it probably won't be too hard to get you in if you'd like to start posting. But to find inspiration, it's very nice. You can just search for something like geometric design, and it'll bring up all different kinds of art. And sometimes they're animated, sometimes they're just still images, but it's very inspirational. You can very quickly see possibilities out of very geometric shapes through Dribbble. So it's, like I said, one of my favorite places to find inspiration. Check that out. Get inspired and start making things. And just to recap your assignment, you're going to be making a graphic, and it really can be anything. Just make sure that you're working at 1920 by 1080 pixels. That's that web large preset when you're making a new document so that you have an HD canvas to work on. Once your artwork is done, export it as a JPEG and upload it to the homework locker so your TA can give you a critique. And don't forget to also zip up your source project files. That's your Illustrator document, the .ai file, and include that as well. And if you have extra time and you're feeling ambitious, feel free to make more pieces of art or do revisions on art that you've already gotten feedback on. That's all for this assignment. Try to have some fun and good luck.